I think children really are the best artists, and I think they're just so wide open that with their minds and their creativity. Nurturing that and allowing that and encouraging it is just so powerful. I've seen it in places I've lived, in Marrakesh, working with children that have never seen a colored pencil or a marker or a paint. These are very unusual situations for these children. They, and doing art with them was something that I found really fascinating.
Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to Rodney Veal's Inspired by podcast. And today, I love to describe it as an interview with someone who is the life of the party. And it is a grand adventurous in art making and is super fun to be around. And I love her artwork. I mean, it is just one of those situations where it's a love fest. And that's what I love about doing this podcast. Lori Parks is I would describe as a multidisciplinary artist because she works in all genres and does such amazing things and has had an adventurous life. And she is amongst us here in Dayton, Ohio. And so without further ado, we're going to have a conversation with Lori Parks. Lori, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
Super cool.
It's great to be here.
Oh, it's always fun. And full disclosure, folks, Lori and I know each other. We've been in the circles and in the mix of the art world and the visual world as well, and just having a good old time. We always do. And this is a little different to have a conversation without the disco music from the NATO disco village party that we were around back at the end of spring. So this will be different.
I think you could do a podcast there next time.
Oh, that would have been fun. I mean, we're going to talk about
the signing anniversary is actually coming up. It's
right.
December 17th or something like that.
Yeah, it's right around the corner.
I think, or November 17th.
Like it is next week. It is next week because we're doing some segments on it. But so I love this because what I love about this podcast is like I do this. I always talk about going in the hot tub time machine and going back because there's got to be it's about the inspiration of like how you became an artist. And so I am so curious. What was that first spark in your childhood? It had to be early to be an artist because you are fully in it. So what was the spark?
Boy, I think we were encouraged by our parents and my family to we weren't allowed to watch TV. My parents were very strict about that. And so because we didn't sit in front of the television, they always had crayons and would roll, paper out on the table, and we would all get together and draw and we'd even make little books together sometimes and things like that. So I think it started when I was really young. I don't even remember I don't remember the first thing I made. I remember a lot of, we were always making things though, out of paper and popsicle sticks. And I mean, it was just all sorts of things. Maybe, I don't know if kids do that now, but we did quite a bit of that. And I really think it did have something to do with our not having access to television, because all that time went into making things.
I love it.
I think it
started in that space. No television. I mean, it's going to be kind of. Was it very unusual? Because, I mean, how many siblings are you? You're a part of. Was it just you? Or
so I have. Yeah, no, I have two sisters and a brother, and we actually collaborated. And I remember when we moved to Ohio from New Hampshire, and I was going into 5th grade. I remember that summer we had a ping pong table, and I remember in the garage when we moved to Beaver Creek, and there wasn't a lot of. We didn't have a lot going on. We didn't really know other kids in the area. It was new, and I remember my brother and I made this melted crayon sculpture. Like it was on the ping pong table. I remember we melted it onto newspaper or something to start it, and so we would do things like that. And I remember collaborating a lot with them. my one sister is very talented with music, but I think we're all pretty visual too. I think we all sort of collaborated in that way and brought that out in each other. We also did a lot of reading too growing up, so I think that also probably helped as well. It's all visual and ideas, but yeah. So so my parents encouraged that. I don't think that they really thought. I always had the feeling that they wanted to steer. Uh, in a very subtle way, steer me into maybe being a lawyer or something like that, which would have been
That is such
disastrous. And then all my
that
lawyer
is such
friends
a
all talked me
pathway.
out of it, saying, "Oh no, you would never last. They would eat you alive," kind of thing.
I can't see you saying that. I object, Your Honor. I mean, I just don't see you saying that on a regular basis. Well, so I mean,
Yeah.
it's interesting that they kind of created this environment where creativity just had to manifest itself. I love the fact that you melted
Yeah, I mean,
crayons. I love that. I
yeah,
love the fact you
and
did with your siblings.
we
That's pretty
wrote.
cool. I was like,
Yeah, and we also I remember, my one sister is very creative, and she taught for many years. Very very gifted painter, and she she would. I don't remember how we did it, but the writing little books and little stories and illustrating them was something else that we did as well. We did that in New Hampshire more, I think, but also possibly when we arrived in Dayton too. I can't remember. My brother and I wrote a book. He wrote it, and I illustrated it, called Patsy Donovan Hero, and that was a story about actually it was a story about dragons, and
I love it.
he even very cleverly made a binding for it and everything. I mean, it was
Very
really quite
elaborate.
um, but this was initiated by us. This wasn't our parents like telling us to do this or
It
saying, "Oh,
was
you
just,
should write a book." It was
or you
us
should.
coming up with these ideas. Um, so yeah, it was I think children really are the best artists, and I think they're just so wide open that with their minds and their creativity, and so nurturing that and allowing that and encouraging it is just so powerful for children. So I've seen it in places I've lived, in Marrakesh, children going up to the Atlas Mountains, working with children who have never seen a colored pencil or a marker or a paint, and they've made, drawings and little paintings of mermaids. I mean, they have no idea. They don't have access to
Well,
television or technology. They don't even have shoes. They don't have shoes.
They do shoes, and it's Marrakesh. I mean, it's like it's
Yeah.
in the mountains. They're like,
Well, it's up
you're
in the
nowhere near the
mountains.
sea.
These are Berbers, and they're up in the mountains, and they're 3-4 hours from the sea. They've never seen the sea. They don't know what it is, and no exposure to popular culture or really almost the modern world. I mean, very, very. These are very unusual situations for these children. They, and doing art with them was something that I found really fascinating, because you're going into a group of children who aren't influenced by sort of the normal things that children are influenced by. So you can see
Right.
their imaginations
Just soar and just
inventing. And
inventing, which is really was super cool. And so,
yeah,
yeah, I love the fact that you
yeah,
responded to that, and it's like this notion of this childlike inquiry. I mean, which we always we assign it as
yeah,
childlike, but really it's really a pure inquiry. Really, is the phrase we probably should use for it.
yeah.
As opposed to that. And so, I love the fact that your parents were like, I can't believe that your parents even entertained the thought of you being a lawyer. I mean, I just thought
Well, I
of
think
all the
it
things
was.
of all.
I think it was sort of like there was. I think they saw the creativity. They knew, and they kind of say things like, "Where did that come from?" Because neither of them were artists, and we weren't really
Huh.
we weren't growing up in an artistic family in that way. My father taught comparative literature, English and Spanish. My mother was a physical therapist, and
Oh.
they were more connected in a lot of ways to probably the literary world and the medical world, and they loved art, and they would take us to museums and to see art, but there wasn't. I think in a way they were working so hard and so much that there wasn't a lot of time for that. Like in junior high and high school, especially, it felt really, really
Right.
busy time. But I would say, there was acknowledgement of the creativity was there, but then there was this practical side of, well, how do you survive in the
Right.
world? And so, of course, they were thinking more practically for us, like you become a doctor, a lawyer, Indian chief, whatever.
you
so,
do you do
there
something
was a little bit of,
anything other than being an artist because well because
yeah,
they don't know.
yeah.
I mean if you don't have an awareness, there's a possibility of it.
Yeah, and there
I
was no
mean,
idea. They had no idea of how you actually how the art world works, or what happens, or how people make their way. Growing up with my father, teaching at university, my sister ended up teaching and being a professor there, teaching painting and art. So that made sense for me. I just went out without really much guidance, or I kind of took this flying leap of faith with my art, and left a
yeah.
wonderful job, a career with the EPA, Environmental Protection Agency in Washington, after I'd been a land use planner and all these things in Seattle, all this
What?
stuff,
You
to
like
do
you
my art, and it was just like, there were people who were stunned, like, how can you leave a job like that and
with
go off to make art?
benefits. I mean, there's
So,
nothing worse than a job with benefits, and like all of a sudden you're like, I want to go explore the world creatively. Like, wait
yeah,
a minute, how do you pay for
it was
insurance?
it was a leap of faith. It was really, and I just thought, well, I'll just, I'll give it a few years and see, see how it goes, see what happens. So, and then
Well,
everything changed. I mean,
everything.
as
Once
soon
you
as
made
I
the
made
leap,
that decision, everything changed. The whole
I love it.
um,
So
life.
okay, so I'm processing because I love having this conversation with you because it's deep diving into your life, and I'm like, ooh, Lori,
Yeah, I'm
I
just
lo-
sort of
well,
dumping it all on you too.
no, don't dump away. I mean, because I'm very curious because the thing is, if you already established working, I mean, and you make this leap of faith, and I loved how you describe it as this leap of faith. I mean, it just had to be the thing like, I need to create. It can't be anything
Yeah.
worse than sitting behind a desk and going,
Oh, it
I
was. I
need to
was.
create.
And it was such a huge drive for me that I sort of wondered, sometimes it was like this, I kind of felt like, I wonder if this is what it is when women, because I didn't really feel this maternal drive to have children so much. It was, the drive was to create something else, to create art. And so when I was working at the EPA in Washington, D.C., I was getting up at 5, 6 in the morning to make sculptures before I would go to work. And then at the end of the day, I would rush home to make more. And that became my schedule. And it was sort of crazy in a way, because, and then weekends I would be working on also on sculptures and art. And so I had this apartment, which I had a housemate with me. She had a bedroom and I had a bedroom, and we shared it. And I remember before she moved in, the apartment, there was nothing in the apartment. It was only my art stuff and a couch. So, in my bed, in the bedroom. And I remember having a Christmas party and inviting all these people to come. And there was nothing to sit on. So they all sat on the floor. They all sat on the carpet. And it was like 100 people came and just jammed into this place where people were like, I mean, it was just this crazy party, because everybody was standing
See?
and sitting on the floor, and there were all these people sitting on the couch, because that was the only place to sit. So there were like 10 people crammed onto the couch. And then everywhere there were wire sculptures on the walls and sculptures standing, and the whole place was full of art. And I remember these people who came, these colleagues of mine from the EPA and other parts of the government that came from across the government, people came, and nonprofits and everything. And they all said, what are you doing working at the government when you're like, clearly you're an artist? And I was, of course, arguing with them, saying, no, I'm working for the EPA.
I was like, I can't be
this
an artist.
this is why I went to graduate school at Harvard, and all these years of, going to school and getting educated and all of this was for that, not for art, because I didn't go to,
That's
I didn't,
interesting.
I didn't get
You didn't go
an
to school.
MFA or
You didn't.
BFA. I
You
didn't go through a
didn't.
BFA. No, I didn't.
Ah,
So I didn't go through the
the
normal
what
track that most
the
artists
normal
would go
track that most
through.
people
Most
go through,
artists,
right?
a sensible artist would grow up in an art family and go do a BFA and an MFA and then, I don't know,
Right.
whatever, apprentice with a gallery, or I don't know what they do even. But, so for me, I really felt like an outsider to it. And
Oh
I probably
wow.
fought it for a long time too, because I was so attracted and drawn to the world of economics and policy, and the environment has been this huge anchor for me. I realized the other day when I was up on some scaffolding installing something, and I realized that I really loved being up high. And then I realized, well, that's because I spent most of my childhood in the top of trees. I climbed trees and I'd be way up in the top with these tiny little branches hanging on, and the wind would start and I'd be moving around, and my mom would be at the bottom of the tree, sort of worrying and wringing her hands and begging me to come down. So I realized that's why I like being up high. And so installing, like in London, I installed the big wire sculpture. So this installation was 7 stories high. I love being up high. I really love that feeling. And I
Wow,
realized
this
this
is a
connection.
really
There was this, it also hit me, all those years that I spent as a child, as young as I could, climbing into trees up to the very top. And here I am climbing up to the top of scaffolding to hang these sculptures that I do, and these installations, or ladders 30 feet up in Marrakesh to suspend stuff in galleries
right.
and palaces and places like that, where it's just crazy, but it makes sense when you see the connections. It's more of an intuitive thing than anything.
I love the fact that the like finding out, discovery, because I did look at your CV. I told you I dig. I did dig a
Uh-oh.
little, and I was like, and I noticed that, and I was like, I was good. I'm glad you brought it up, because it was like, oh, she didn't follow the traditional pathway into art making, and at all. And I'm like, so
No.
I mean, like, so you have all these people who are like crammed in your home. They're seeing this art, telling you should be an artist, and you're saying, no, 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 no. I meant to work for the
Well, I think
EPA.
that was the
What
start.
was
I think that was that was the start of realizing, really kind of, I wouldn't say it's emerging, but emerging awareness about it. I mean, I always sort of knew and felt like, growing up in Oakwood, this art teacher, Mr. Carmichael at Oakwood High School, he was so wonderful. He really nurtured a lot of the art for me. He sort of took me out of the class and gave me a space and said, okay, do whatever you want now. He was really creative. I guess, he really was an example of an artist for me, because like he'd do things like he'd wear a different hat from a different country.
Mhm.
Like every week he'd put on a different hat, and he would speak all day long with that accent, and he would be in character. I mean, he'd be teaching, but he'd be wearing a hat from Scotland, and he'd be speaking with a Scottish accent the whole day. So he was this creative, and also really aware and nurturing for people like me, I felt kind of outside in a way. I was really immersed in the art, and I wanted to be doing that. And he brought in casting equipment, a centrifuge and a kiln, and he said, okay, now it's time for you to learn to cast some metal. So this is the kind of thing he did. He taught
Mm.
me how to use a centrifuge, how to cast metal, and then casting bronze. And I was riding my bike around the garage sales buying sterling silver spoons that were chewed up by the garbage disposals. I would buy all this stuff, bring it back to Oakwood, and melt it down in his class and cast little sculptures in sterling silver, and then they grew to be eventually 1-ton bronzes, years later in
Wow.
England when I started, and in
Yeah.
Spain doing these really big things. But the seeds were planted when I was growing up. And then the awareness really started to emerge, I think, when I was in Washington, D.C. And I think it was hard to, when I started hearing from so many people around me in Washington. I think because it's a city, it does have fabulous art, but the dominance of the Hill and the politics is really overreaching in the feeling of the city and the life of the city. And so, luckily there's a National Gallery and the Smithsonian to counterbalance some of that.
Right.
But
Right.
I was hearing from a lot of people at that time, a lot of my
That
colleagues and my friends,
they're just
and
like, get thee to an art gallery space. And so, I mean,
yeah,
so
and
so
I
when you're
think
here, so when you're hearing that, I'm just like, did you just kind of go, okay, like you're processing, you're doing it? What was like? Was your first showing of work in DC?
Yeah, so what happened was, I mean, it was really fascinating. I can't remember. I was working for the EPA, and I remember I started making some big sculptures in this apartment where I lived. And so I made this one that was a sort of goddess figure, very much like the textural pieces I was going to make by the time I got to Marrakesh. And I remember then it came time to move it out, and I couldn't get it out the door. It was too big. So it
Oh
was too big to
gosh.
take out of the apartment. I got so carried away by it. It was big. And so I had to cut it, the base of it, I had to cut it off so that we could fit it through the door. And so that meant cutting it off at an angle, which meant that then I could hang it on the wall that way, and it would be coming out of the wall almost like a figurehead on a ship or something would come out. And so, I think I started working really larger scale, and I was still at the EPA. I decided I had this apartment full of work, and I decided, I think I need to have a show of all this work. So I think, if I remember right, the very first show I had was Border Books in Washington, D.C. And I remember I mean, I invited all these people I knew from EPA, Department of Agriculture, all across Washington policy, mostly policy. It was mostly this whole thing that I was in.
Yeah.
And they all came, and it was like 350 people showed up in this Borders bookstore. And most of them brought bottles of champagne. I remember people,
See, I tell you, I'm
champagne
like,
corks and champagne everywhere, and everyone having this. It was an incredible party. I mean, it was
told you
absolutely, and I
people.
sold work too. And I sold the sculptures. I sold wire sculptures. I was making all these wire things, all sorts of things. And then after that, I had a couple of local shows in an old house in Cleveland Park, where there was that part of Washington. There was
Uh-huh.
a house that had been donated to the community as a community center by people. And this house, I had a couple of shows there. And that was very successful. Those were dogs, wire dogs and cats of people in the neighborhood, their dogs and people walking dogs. And then after that, okay, then I decided that I would leave my job. So I did leave my job. I ended up in Mallorca, Spain,
Okay.
and
Okay.
just to make the connection between Washington and Mallorca and what was happening was then when I got to Mallorca, Addison Ripley Gallery in Washington, D.C. offered me a show of my wire sculptures. So I traveled back from Mallorca with all these wire sculptures I'd made there, and they were all packed into suitcases because I can flatten them and roll them up and stick them in a suitcase. So I showed up with a few boxes and 2 or 3 big suitcases in the gallery, and they said, "Well, where's all the art?" And they thought that was like my clothes in the suitcases. Well, I said, "I don't have any clothes. The only thing I have here is art." So I took everything out and unrolled it and shaped it and put it, and that was my show. I mean, that's how I work with wire. So the show at Addison Ripley was wonderful. It was the same thing. I invited all these people, and there were about, I don't know, 300, 400 people. There were so many people. The gallery was packed, and the whole sidewalk outside of the gallery was full of people standing, waiting to come in. So that's what happened in Washington, and there were people from all across the government who came. It was fascinating,
And that just
and it was
jump
all
started
wire
the
sculptures. And I really knew that I was an art. That was when I said, okay, I'm having
yeah, you're an
shows
artist.
now, and
Now
yeah.
you've done it. Now you've
So,
done it.
but
But I'm just that you kind of, and the thing is, why was there a move to Mallorca, Spain? Was it just to
so
get
when I
away?
left, well,
Like
when
it
I
was just
left
like, did you wanted to live there? It's like, I want to live there.
well, I looked around Washington. I was trying to find a studio space in Washington, D.C., and it had to be very affordable because I was leaving this job, the secure job, and I remember the neighbors had it was a garage that was it had been converted to a studio at one point, and I was just dying to use this as my studio. And I went to them and asked them, could I rent it? And they said, no, we don't really want to. So I kept, I asked them several times. So that fell through. And I looked for garages. I looked for different spaces. Felt like I couldn't
Yeah.
find anything. And I started telling friends I was looking around. So one person said, well, we have a fig ranch out in California in our family, and you could go there and you could live and work on the fig ranch. And I was seriously considering that. And then someone else said, well, I have this place in Mallorca. Do you want to go there? Because, they couldn't be there. And I said, yeah, I'll go to Mallorca. So I sublet my room in this shared house that I had where I was living at that point. And I had quit my job. I'd handed in my resignation. And when that happened, actually, when I handed in my resignation, it coincided with getting an artist in residence fellowship at the Blue Mountain Colony art residency program in upstate New York. And that was sort of the transition for me, leaving EPA, going up there, spending a month with a
Mm.
huge studio in an incredible place. It was I don't know, 40,000 acre estate, in the Adirondack,
Wow.
sort of upstate New York. Yeah, amazing place. And I worked on a lot of wire. I excavated the dump that had been on the site of the family living in this place, the Hawkshield family. I had owned it, did own it, still own it. But anyways, back to Mallorca. I decided to go to Mallorca, and then started traveling back and forth between Mallorca, Spain, and coming back and forth. I sublet my room. I then started showing around Mallorca, and I loved it because I really love to be close to nature. I really love,
That
a
seems to be
lot
a
of the
recurring
inspiration for my
theme.
work. Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, a lot. My whole life has been being in nature and climbing mountains, dog sledding, working on a fishing boat in Alaska. All these kinds of jobs I had were because I could get paid to do this kind of work, but I I felt like if I was going to get paid, whatever it was, it would be great to be in an environment where I just felt ecstatic every day about waking up and watching the sunrise over Alaska, you know, uh, in the panhandle surrounded by islands and whales and surfacing and bald
Yeah.
eagles.
I
I mean,
mean,
just this amazing, and Mallorca was beautiful. This finca on top of a mountain. It was just,
mm,
the olive trees were all 1,000 years old. The animals, and I mean, it was an amazing, magical place. I mean, and I feel really lucky that as an artist, I have looked for these kinds of I've been lucky that things have come my way and that I've embraced these kinds of possibilities. And that's been a big part of it for me, and I decided to go to Mallorca and do that without knowing how long I would be there, if it'd be, a couple months or a couple years or,
years. Yes.
Uh,
You just kind of you are putting limitations on it because it's do you know what I'm saying? Like there was no need to put
yeah.
a limitation. Like you'd already shown work, sold work, people are embracing it. So when you take that out of the equation and you talk about all these like sort of all the places, and that's what makes it fun. That's because you, like I said, I described you as the party. Where there's a party, there's
Oh
Lori
well,
Parks. I mean, come on, there's a party.
I spent a lot of I spent a lot of time also alone working, and
Yeah,
sometimes when
but
I'm working really hard, I may not talk or see anybody for 3 or 4 days. In complete
wow, you
isolation,
really
really. And so people see, like, I
this
am
part of
social.
you.
I love meeting. I love going to a dinner party where there might be, like in Marrakesh or in Mallorca, especially in Marrakesh, where you might have 5 or 6 different languages being spoken around the table, people flipping between, French, English, Arabic, Italian, all these different people from all over. And I love different cultures. I love, even here, when I worked in apple orchards in college in the Columbia River Gorge, I was fascinated by in the apple orchards. Half the workers, well, one third of the workers were from Mexico or El Salvador or Nicaragua, or they were all. It
Yeah,
was a whole Hispanic community there. So within America, there are these different groups, and so I like connecting with. I just think it's so fascinating going into other cultures, and that's a whole other part of my art. It really
which
inspires. The nature inspires my art, but travel and different cultures, and
really,
it's
really
like
points that way.
each yeah, and each culture is like a puzzle to figure out. Each place where I've done my
Yeah,
art and lived has been like it's like a puzzle for me to understand, to figure out. And I suppose my art is also a way to sort of figure it out. And
and kind of explain the place and state that you're in that presence in that moment.
I'm Bonnie Miles, Membership Coordinator of CET. Thank you for listening to Rodney Veal's Inspired By. This podcast is a production of CET and ThinkTV, 2 local PBS stations. As PBS stations, the work we do online, on air, and in the community is supported by listeners like you. If you're enjoying the show and would like to support our work, please consider becoming a member at cetconnect.org or thinktv.org. Plus, when you sign up to donate at least $5 a month, you'll get access to special members-only streaming videos on the PBS app through Passport. Learn more at cetconnect.org or thinktv.org.
If you're enjoying this conversation, the art show, also hosted by Rodney Veal, is available to stream anytime from anywhere on YouTube or the PBS app.
Because you are, like I said, you are working in multiple forums. But
yes,
that's why I'm so
I have
that's why
a
I'm
very broad repertoire of
yeah,
materials. I work in many materials, and I
yeah.
develop techniques for. I develop techniques. I invent probably because I didn't go through an art school that taught me the ways to do things. I just figure something out myself and invent it, or I develop it myself. And so, like all the textural work, the textural panels, the big radiance sculptures,
Mhm.
the big collages that are very, very
And
sort
these
of
sort of
textural, they
assemblages.
came. Yeah, and the
Yeah,
assemblages that contain so many cultural objects, and then they're
right.
also embedded in the textual panels too. All of that came about because in Marrakesh, I didn't have very much money when I got there. But the one thing that I saw, I'd leave my studio, I'd walk through the souks and walk into the Medina. This is an old walled city. It was right in the heart of the old
Of
part
Mar
of the city of
of the city.
Marrakesh, and my studio was right in the middle of all that. And I would walk through at night and look at everything thrown out. So outside of, on in the gerbs and in the street, the the leather workers and the shoemakers would put out mountains of leather scraps, or paper. There was tons and tons of paper, cardboard, carton.
So you
So
just
the textual panels, all those materials, I started using for my art, and that's where a lot of it came from. it was free, it was cheap, it was there every
Mhm.
night. I could find more. So I would go out at night and find all these things at night, and
I
come back,
love it.
bring it all back to the studio, sort through it, and then it would go right into, you know, the paper. I had all these methods I used then to develop
Mhm.
to separate the paper and break it down basically, so then I could create the textures and have it do what I wanted it to do. So I spent years, figuring all that out.
Which but the thing is, I love the fact that you talk about like spending years to figure it out, because in many ways it's like, when we
Yeah.
talk about not going the BFA route, the MFA route to art making, and you're figuring it out in the processes, but I don't. I'm positing this to you. I don't think your work would be as rich and inviting to such ideas and feelings if you had gone the traditional route. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, I don't think it would have been the same kind of
Yeah.
work. And I think it's like,
I wonder if I would have, I wonder
yeah.
if I would have ended up doing something totally different, or, uh, you know, I guess, I got my undergraduate degree at the Evergreen State College out in Washington State, and then I went to Harvard for a Master's of Public Administration degree, which is, really about governance and, economics and
Mhm.
policy, environmental policy, all of that. And by the time I came through the other side and went down that road, then I think in a way, I think that actually fueled my need to make more collages and more sculptures and more. It just, I remember that year. I mean, wow! I remember before I graduated from Harvard, I remember that last year I only had time to make 5 collages that year, and I remember how difficult that was. I gave them all away as like birthday presents and gifts, but I mean,
Wow.
I just remember it was really, really hard not to have the time to make, to be creative, to be making things.
Mhm.
And so, um, yeah, I think you're probably right. It probably would have looked really,
Yeah.
it probably would have been
No.
different for me. I just don't even know. I don't know what it would have been like to be in an MFA program or BFA program. I have no idea. I, I just, I can't imagine, really. I mean, I
I
guess I
don't.
spent
I
a
don't.
huge amount of time at museums, like art museums, like in Washington, D.C. It was so cold in the wintertime, and my apartment was freezing where I was. So I remember I used to go to the National Gallery on Saturdays and Sundays,
And
and
just
I spend a lot of
absorb it
time in the
in.
museums. They were nice and warm. They
Yeah.
were heated. I could get a coffee. I could spend my whole day there, and be warm. And so I I would go back and look at. I mean, I just loved in the National Gallery the huge Calder, mobile, enormous thing. It was massive,
Enormous.
gigantic, and walking in and seeing that, it was always like I loved seeing. There were certain artists I just loved to go and see their work because I felt like they were talking to me. I mean, I sort of felt like their work and my work was in
Really resonated
dialogue.
with
Like,
you.
yeah,
Yeah.
like I was really fascinated by Joseph Cornell's work, because I was doing assemblages and box assemblages. This is when I was living in Washington doing policy, and I was making a lot of wire sculptures. At that point, I had sold my first wire sculpture. The people who bought it had Calder's work. They bought this cat that I made in wire, and it was $150. They kept saying, "Are you sure? Are you sure that's all it is?" And then they invited me to dinner in their house, and they had Alexander Calder's work. It's like, no wonder they wanted
No
to know.
wonder.
Like,
No
I
wonder
know
they're.
all it is.
So talk about underpricing
Sure,
your
it's not
work,
$1 million.
Lori. At that point, yeah. Well, that's talk about underpricing your work there. I mean, it's just. But I think. But isn't that? But isn't that typical of an artist though? Like when you're starting out, you don't think about monetary value, but then you have to, and it's just like, oh my god, you don't
Yeah.
know
Well, it's
because clearly
interesting.
because they responded to the work. That meant that the work had a
Oh,
value to
yeah.
them.
And
Yeah.
I must say, I have to say something about people who buy art too. Is like, for me, something important I feel is people who had bought my art, like that couple who bought the first wire sculpture that I ever sold. They taught me, like so many people teach me. So many people, maybe I didn't go through art school, but there's like the school of learning from other people, which
Mhm.
is so important. And so collectors, I find, there are a lot of collectors who know way more about art than I do because they have studied it, because they study it as collectors and they do research and they talk to a lot of people. Maybe they're thinking about it as, I don't know. It's a passion. It's a passion for many people who buy art. But I'm just saying that, that couple, they were experts on Calder. They knew him. They,
Because it
so
was a passion. It was a passion for them in
and
that
they knew
collection.
him. They actually, and then in Washington,
So
it
they
just
knew
so
that,
happened.
like, they actually knew him as in.
Yeah, and then I met just through coincidence, I suppose, about 5 different people who were connected to Calder. They either Alex grew up half the time in France, and the Calders had a place in France. He had a studio in France, and they would go over and have like Christmas dinner with the Calders, and so. And Alex was somebody I knew and I met and got to know. I mean, that was all accidental. I mean, these were just, and so I probably do have probably 4 or 5 collectors who have Alexander Calder's work and they buy my work, which I'm like the bargain basement compared to Alexander Calder. And but still,
Well,
it's so flattering to be part of that sort of family, have some kind of connection there, because Alexander Calder is a definite hero of mine.
oh, and it
I
come,
didn't.
but the thing is, the wire sculptures are part of it. Because
Yeah.
I did
Yeah.
sneak into Dana Wiley's gallery space with your artwork currently.
Ah,
Because
you saw
remember
it. Okay, I knew
I
you
saw
would.
I told you I was going to sneak in there. I was like,
I knew you would. Well, why? You should have come when I was there.
I know, but it was like,
But
it's one of those things where it's like, why I looked around and it was distracting because we were having a meeting, and I was like, I just want to
I
dive.
know what you were doing there. I know
Yeah, and it
exactly
was
when
like,
you were there.
well, the funny thing is, I snuck it in,
Yeah.
so I was so distracting because it was like, I'm like, Lori's doing these tall totem sculptures over in the corner. There's a mass of them. I'm like,
I
oh, and then I'm looking over the
yeah.
wire sculptures, and I'm looking at the light hitting the mobiles and leaving a shadowy imprint on the wall that was moving as it was like a movie. And I'm sitting there going,
It-
what are we talking about again? I'm sorry, because you distracted me with your work. I was like, how dare you, Lori? How dare you? And so I just thought it was.
yeah.
And I just remember you telling me, like, you told me like a week ago. You told me about how Dana said she's never installed artwork like this before,
Oh
and it just because.
yeah, and this is what I've and I and it's not just there, but I had something over. Right now, I have a suspension and installation over at Indiana University, and it's interesting. The jury selected it, and then basically the jury and the installer, the curator, all these people, they all decided, we don't know how to put this up, so we better contact her and get her to come over here. So this is what happens. I have to go install it because they really don't know how to install the wire sculptures. It has to be me doing it, with the exception of London. When I did the PricewaterhouseCoopers, that was 7 stories high. I wasn't allowed to go up 7 stories because it was too
Really? Is it?
dangerous to be in the. It was too dangerous to be in the top of the room, the top of the core of the gallery. The top
Okay.
floor was the 7th floor up,
Right.
and the gantry men, they were allowed to be up there in the basket that was moving back and forth. So I had to be on the floor, 7 floors down, to
Telling
direct
them.
them. Yeah, and so I can't remember if I had a walkie-talkie or what it was, but I was directing them where the things had to go to drop down the lines. And then the way we did it is we tied off the sculptures at the bottom and raised them up that way, because that was the way to position them. But it was a
Yeah.
very complex show. It had a couple of pieces that were floating rooms that I made out of wire, and those were rooms that were suspended in space above the ground, but people could go inside of them. And then around the base was, I think I had candles under the perimeter of the rooms to uplight.
Oh my
It was a
God.
wild show. That was another show where, boy, that was also about 300 people that showed up, and PricewaterhouseCoopers actually said, "Oh, we'll just cover the cost of champagne. Don't worry about anything." And I think they had something like, I don't know, 5 crate loads of, or maybe carloads of, truckloads of champagne for that. It was
Let me
really,
tell you, and
that,
I think it's
that was an amazing
speaking
opening.
speaking of, from my own personal experience with the Europeans and the Brits, they do love
Oh,
a
they,
good champagne party.
oh
I'm just letting
yeah,
folks, if you've never
it's,
hung out with folks from England and London,
and
it's just it
it's so
isn't, but that's
funny,
the fun
you know.
part. Like, did you
Yeah, and
ever imagine?
you don't have to speak the language to look at the art. They don't have to know my language to know my art. They don't have to speak English and know English
Mhm.
to understand what it is I'm saying. It's like that's what's so
What they're
beautiful
feeling?
about art. It's a
Yeah.
universal language. And I mean, and I've had people break down and cry seeing my art. I've had
Oh, I
people
can
just
see why.
laugh
Yeah,
seeing my art. Well,
and
because also some of
smile
the
and delight.
bronzes, the shows,
Bronzes,
like the wire sculptures, tend to be quite joyful
wi-
and fun and
joyful and fun.
playful.
But
But
then
those
there's other things
bronzes, I have
that are
some bronzes
speaking.
that are very, very,
Yeah.
uh, oh, I don't know how to explain it. Difficult to look at, actually, some of them.
Well,
Yeah, I
because
mean, most of my
but they're
work
not
is
there.
very joyous, but
But when
yeah,
there's
it's the
but the
emotions.
right, but when there's a moment for you to kind of speak to things within your work, it's because I think it's because of the background that you've had, and that's what. And I've been I'm it was just it was
Yeah,
interesting to be in
yeah,
Dana's space to kind of capture these ideas,
yes.
the multiplicity of ideas of Lori Parks, and I
Yeah,
just
I
thought to myself,
think.
folks, you need to go see this. It's up, go see
Yeah,
it if you're
I
you
think
know.
the exhibitions, various exhibitions I'm having, and pieces and group shows too, like even the Earth Stacks I had at the Fitton Center, and also the Springfield Museum for Art. Beautiful spaces, absolutely exquisite, um, and beautiful lighting too, and all these places. Um, I think your point about art school is, so I did all these things in life because I wanted to go into other cultures and I wanted to see the world, basically. I knew it was a big place, and I, uh, very young, started going to these, way out. At the age of 16, I was getting on planes flying to Vermont for wilderness leadership school and things like that, you know, and dog sledding and things like that. It's like, I feel like by the time I decided to give myself to my art full time, I had so much I had done already, in a way, in places
That
I'd
just kind of
been, that
that it kind of
that
you'd already
became
your thing.
the
The
source of my ideas. My ideas weren't from studying another artist in a class or something. It was, I don't know how to explain it, but I mean, I'm speculating because I've never been through art school, so I don't know what I'd be missing. But I just think that that's
I
what
don't think you're missing much, but
informed,
I didn't throw that
that's
one.
what informed my art, was different cultures and traveling
And that was
and
important to you. Yeah.
yes, and a lot of it was, I mean, a lot of the, and there was a necessity too. I mean, working in the apple orchards with migrant workers, I was making money for college. I'm going to Alaska, working on a fishing boat in Alaska, salmon fishing, um, on the outside, which is the dangerous part of Alaska. I mean, that was all because I had to make money for school, for university. If I wanted to go somewhere else, I had to pay myself. So that's what I did. I went,
You went and you
um,
did it, and you kind of
yeah,
you and so I
and
yeah.
so yeah, and then living and being in these different places and all these different experiences. I mean, so many places and people, and um, yeah,
But it's
so
in you,
that
but
became the
the
source in a
the
way,
source in a way,
and
yeah. Yeah.
yeah, the material.
I love it. Because I think it's such a variety of materials, and piggybacking on this conversation about not going to school, because this is one of the questions we've been this season been asking people, because it has to be a certain. I mean, and just hear me out on this question, is like this sense of, because you didn't go through the traditional, do you feel a sense that I mean, your work has been accepted. I mean, it's accepted now. I mean, but at the time when you were starting, did you feel a little bit of like, I shouldn't be an artist because I'm not? It feels a bit of imposterish when the rest of the world has followed this.
No,
You never felt that
I
that
never.
sense of imposter, like syndrome of doubt?
No, no,
Yeah, because
no. I
people have a tendency to
never.
kind of go, "Oh, you have an MFA
I
from
never.
Yale," or
Isn't that
you
funny?
know,
I never. Well, now see, I had a master's degree. I did have the sense. I had a master's degree from Harvard,
Harvard,
and
right? At that
I had
point,
come. See, I had gone to an undergraduate school. It didn't give grades. It was interdisciplinary. Evergreen is highly experimental, and then I wanted to go to a more traditional place for grad school. I knew that, and I wanted to study policy. I wanted to study
yeah.
economics and environmental sciences. I had environmental policy was really a strong interest of mine. So I applied to MIT and Cornell. I applied to these places, and I got into all of these places. And so I guess I had in the back of my mind, well, I can do that if I can get accepted by all these places, and they offer me money, and I go to Harvard because they offer me the most, then I'll go there. Because I have to. I have to go where I can afford it, where I can pay for it, whatever. But I had that sense. So it was like, okay, I can do this if I want to. University or advanced degrees, that's something I can do. But then with the art, I don't know, it was just an act of faith, and there's just, it
You
just
just knew.
feels like when I'm making the art, it's such a flow of ideas and sometimes it comes so fast that it's like a fountain. I feel like a fountain or something, some
Oh,
kind of,
like a
and I'm
hose.
writing down the
It's a
ideas
fire
or
hose. It's a fire hose.
yeah, and I have to
Yeah,
write
which I
down the
understand.
ideas so that I don't lose them and I can come back to them later. I don't always draw things. I sometimes describe them with words, and I'll make little sketches. But I often, with the wire sculptures, I never draw any of that. They are drawings. They are drawings in
Yeah, they
space.
really are. That and how they
But
hang.
and
Yeah, it's
yeah,
so
how they
beautiful.
hang, the shadows, the movement. People don't realize that movement and the shadows, the lighting, that's just as important in, like, say, a painter talking about like the color of the paint or a paint. It's like people don't think of movement and space and shadows, lighting. That's such an important element for what I do, and it's often not talked about that way. That's actually a media. That's actually a substance. It's a substance. It's part of. It would be like talking about oil pastels or something. I mean, but people don't think of like space and how things are. It's not. I think generally, I think people aren't really aware of that, but that's a big part of what I do with the wire sculptures. It's creating
But I
that
think it's
volume and the movement.
but it's also this movement involvement in the kind of sculptural pieces that I've seen. I like because I've I came across this image from Sotheby's, and I wanted to talk
Oh,
about
you,
this.
oh,
The
oh,
beautiful
that's
sculpture
great.
of the. I was like
Yeah.
this form, and I was like,
Yeah.
this is why we get on these conversations about dance and movement. I was like, oh,
Oh,
now I
yeah. So,
understand. See,
oh, so
now
yeah,
I understand why we.
you,
I'm like,
you
now I
read the
put two and two together.
catalog then. You saw the Beyond
Yes,
Limits, the
I
Sotheby's,
took
yeah,
see,
Chatsworth House. Oh
Lori,
my
I told
God,
didn't I
yeah.
not tell you I was going to deep dive into this stuff?
Well, that is, I can say that I have been really lucky. Sotheby's saw a sculpture that I'd made. It was on display. It was a 1-ton piece of bronze in Spitalfields Sculpture Park in Spitalfields, the East London. There's an urban sculpture park there, and somebody. I mean, it's kind of, I don't know if I should talk about that, but somebody from Sotheby's saw it there, and almost drove into it actually, and on a motorcycle. And
Oh
they told
no!
me, anyways, it was, who are you? Because there was this plaque, there was a plaque on the ground
And it
next to
just said,
it,
it's
so
like
that
Lori
people
Parks.
knew my name then. It's like he got my name, and so then the next thing I know, some time passed, but they basically wanted me to show at Chatsworth House, the Duke of Devonshire's place in the north of England, which is, and he happens to be on the board of Sotheby's. Maybe he still is. I'm not sure. But the Duke of Devonshire, oh, he's so kind. He and Sotheby's, so great for me. Now, when you talk about learning, I have to say that Sotheby's has been a really important part of my learning, because I know, if I have coffee with them or they take me to lunch or whatever we do, they're always saying things that I'm like a sponge, just soaking up everything they tell
Every
me.
bit.
And, and I go in and look at the shows they're setting up there, what they're selling, and their catalogs are so beautifully done and so well
really are.
researched, and I learn a lot from all those people. And so having a piece in Beyond Limits was really an honor for me, because they only take 20 sculptures from all over the world for that. And I felt like I was treated it was so kind, all of them, and treated with so much respect. And that was really important. I felt the other artists were people I really admired, people who were in the show at the same time. It was just, it was just an amazing lineup of artists. So, I felt like I was part of a little club. So that was great. and in one of the most important stately homes in all of Europe, Chatsworth
Right.
House is just a stunning place, and nothing else like it anywhere in the world.
Truly,
So,
there's
I was very, very lucky to make that connection. And the piece itself was inspired by dance. And that came from the time that I was spending in Marrakesh, watching women dance and people dance there as part of the culture, both Berber and also Moroccan, Arab. So, that really made an impact on me. And I think I've always been probably pretty sensitive to the sense of movement, recognizing people by the way they walk, or I think I've always been very sensitive to movement. And so I love things like dance. I love the way animals move, the way, horses move, and that gets translated in my work, capturing
And it
that sense
does.
of movement, just like the
Right.
dance. And then you suspend things in space.
Oh, that's even more.
There's even more. I remember I made a wire sculpture of Josephine Baker, and she did this thing where she was at one point the most famous dancer in the entire world. She lived in Paris, but she also had a place in Marrakesh. She was a mistress of the Glowy, and she would dance and perform in Paris, and New York. And she would wear this banana belt, and she would dance naked. And so I made a wire sculpture of Josephine Baker dancing, and she was suspended, and she was dancing with her banana belt. And that was really, really fun. And that piece, I showed that in Marrakesh and different places. I probably should bring it here to America and show it.
You need to bring it here. You still need to bring it here.
I know.
You really, really do. And
It's
it's
a
like,
really fun piece.
I love it. And it's one of those situations, like Lori, it's like I said, like how I introduced you. You're this adventurer who's sharing your adventures through art. That's pretty kind of
nice
cool.
Way to put it. I like
That's
that.
really
That's
pretty
probably
cool.
True. I feel like there's a story behind every piece that I make, and and I sort of think of the textural panels and and all of these works that came out of Marrakesh, the reasons and where they take me too. Like the pieces actually take me physically to different places. The opportunities, and the places that I'd never dream of being. So. And it's certainly an honor. Some of the people who have collected my work, such an honor to, to be in certain collections. It's just, leaving EPA, I never would have dreamed that
you never
I'd
dreamed
be,
this.
I
mean, but that's what an adventure is. You don't know how it's going to end, because you don't know how it's going to turn out.
And it's still going on. It's still getting better and better all the time. And and I think that I never would have thought I'd be making a piece for the King of Morocco, or the King Charles would have something of mine. He has a collage actually. A lot of the
Really?
collages have quite a bit of movement in them too, but they're very, many of them are quite surreal feeling. They have a sort of
Okay.
surreal quality. There's quite a bit of movement in them too, though, and color.
Mm.
Yeah, and they're in different places. There's some at the
They're
Royal
just
Free Hospital in London, big ones. They've got some, yeah, I mean, these pieces, it's exciting to have them in different places and where people can
it's like,
see them.
yeah. I mean, that's so, Lori, I just hope, that everybody gets a chance when they see Lori Parks, you see Lori Parks's name associated with any artwork, you run. Don't even walk, run, because it's inspiring work, it's beautiful work, it's stunning work, it's conversational. There's a lot to discover and unpack because it is a reflection of you
Mm.
as being this adventurous spirit amongst us. I am just grateful that we met each other, and the fact that we hung out at we had that hang at Club NATO, which
Oh
I'm
God,
still.
that was so much fun. Well, I mean,
I'm like, 'cause
sometimes I feel like I see you more than anybody else around here. But yeah,
well, but that is
NATO
fun.
was, yeah, I mean, well, just all these events we go to the same.
Yeah, they're always fun
Yeah,
for
the NATO
folks.
event was really fun. That
Wasn't
was
it? Wasn't that
fantastic.
fun? Wasn't it fun to watch those guys like literally let their hair down?
Oh, you mean the after parties? Yeah.
After
Oh
party,
boy,
that
yeah.
was yeah.
We
Yeah.
need to do that again. Yeah. I know.
Oh, we
Boy.
absolutely should do. We do it. Well, it's going to happen. It's coming. It's coming. But I love every time I leave my a space with you. I leave just floating on air, full of joy.
Yeah, well, it's mutual. I feel the same way, and always get a few good ideas after we spend time together. So,
Yes, I
so
love it.
it's just like this great thing that kind of permeates, the energy or something. So
But
yeah,
it's fun. It's so much fun. So I hope that everyone
yeah.
else feels the way I do, that you are just a joy and delight. And I'm so glad I got you on the podcast.
I
I told you.
know.
And it was,
I am
yes.
too.
Yes. So thank you
So,
for being a
so
guest.
thank you for inviting me. I've had a wonderful time. I hope I didn't talk too much, but there's way more
No,
we
you
didn't
had some
even
fun.
get to. So,
Oh well, which we'll say for the artist talk that I'm your moderator for.
Oh yes. Oh, I can't
So
wait.
yeah,
I'm so excited about that.
yeah.
I really
See, I
think
love
that's
it. We're
going to
gonna have a
be
good time.
fun.
We're gonna have a good time. We
Yeah.
always have a good time. There's always a
I
good time.
know,
When
we
Lori's
do.
involved, it's gonna be fun.